came home one night from work, and she was waiting for me with a bag packed, said, "I don't love you anymore," and left.
Welcome back to another episode of Daddy Issues. Our guest today is going to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his story.
So my name's Tyler. So how it kind of started off in general is I had kids starting off pretty young. My first one was born 2 months after I turned 17. We were kind of in high school. Well, obviously we were in high school and everything. I graduated early to do the military deal to kind of suffice that whole option. We were together for 5-6 years probably. We were together when I turned 16 up until I was 21, I think. We had our first kid, and it was all fine and dandy. And had a house shortly after I started the military deal. Had a house. After a couple years, we decided to actually try for a second child. And so this is kind of where it goes downhill. She was kind of I'll say accusatory toward the whole cheating and lying type of deal. Being that I ended up working 2 jobs because she couldn't necessarily keep a job, which wasn't too bad on her. You know, I turned my home into a business for her to have her own daycare and everything else like that. So I did try to do all the right stuff.
And are you out of the military at this time?
No, I was still in.
Okay.
I was still in. Yep. So I ended up getting a business license to run daycare out of my own home, and she was basically my employee type of deal, because she didn't have the nonsense know-how to do all that, which whatever, not a big deal. That whole deal's going on, not a big problem, but at that point I was working 2 jobs to kind of fulfill everything, and she was accusing of the whole cheating, lying, not being here enough type of deal, but couldn't exactly stray from it, had to keep a living, so I ended up dropping that second job. Still did the military. On the side I flipped cars for many years, and that was kind of how I got by with everything, was flipping cars. I still do it to this day sometimes for just a little extra money for no reason particularly. I just like working on stuff. I've been a mechanic. I've been a mechanic since I was 14, so.
And that hustle mentality. It's like,
yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's $5. You know what I mean? If you can make a little bit, let me make it.
Yeah, a little bit's better than nothing,
Yeah.
So I did that. I still do it every once in a while, but at this point, later in that time, after dropping the second job, flipping cars and kind of making that all work, she finally gets pregnant. We ended up losing it 12 weeks in. She kind of blamed me for that. I mean, obviously hormones and everything else like that plays into factor. She ended up apologizing for that later on after the whole ordeal. So we obviously tried again shortly down the line. That one took. She was pretty excited. Obviously, I was too. But it took her all of a month. I came home one night from work, and she was waiting for me with a bag packed, said, "I don't love you anymore," and left.
What?
Yeah, left our first kid.
As she's pregnant?
Yep. First, she was like just over a month pregnant, yep. And she knew.
She left you and your first child and just left?
Yep.
That shit doesn't even make sense.
Bro, I'm telling you. And then, and it's funny because she told me she was going to go stay with a friend. I knew her friend. They were best friends, whatever, not a big deal. Her best friend then gets a hold of me and asks what's going on. I was like, what are you talking about? You should probably know by now, And turns out she actually left, went to my best friend's house, and cheated on me and was with him after that.
Dude, do you know how many fucking, oh my God, do you know how many the same shit every time? And it's the best friend.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like my best friend lived with me before she moved in with me. And he left. He moved out because of her, because they never got along. Like, seriously never got along. Always arguing and complaining and stuff like that.
Hey, guys, real quick, if you can jump over to patreon.com/daddyissuesofthetruth, help support what we're doing, help support the channel, just so we can get as many dads as we can on the podcast and share their stories, and hopefully it's helping you guys out. That would be huge, man, and I definitely need your support, could use your support. And I hope that what we're doing is helpful to you. So if you guys could help out, patreon.com/daddyissuesothetruth, and greatly appreciated, man. Thank you, guys. All right, back to the episode.
So that whole ordeal happened, and he's pretty much lucky I was in the military, because I probably would have been in handcuffs, But overall, it wasn't an ordeal. And after all that kind of flew into perspective, I had my first kid with nowhere to bring him, and that became a very big downward spiral into everything that she started doing. Because after she left, she just became a totally different person. Just flipped the script on me. We could not get along. She was calling the cops on me all the time and trying to keep my kids from me, for all sorts of stuff. And that continued on for about 2 years. That whole idea. I actually didn't even get to see my second. So my daughter is my second born. I didn't even get to see her. I saw her probably 3 times her first year of life.
Wow. And you weren't allowed to be there for the pregnancy, I'm assuming?
No.
And you guys are still, what, 21 years old, 22 years old?
Yeah, probably around there.
Did you have your parents or anybody kind of like trying to facilitate like what was going on, or is it just you two not getting along?
Oh, so yes and no. So obviously my family was, I wouldn't say necessarily sided with me. They were just trying to help me pursue seeing them and trying to have a place for them to do whatever else like that. Because after that whole ordeal, I ended up not having to be able to keep my house.
Right.
So because daycare and then everything else piled on top of it was pretty extra. At this point, she had not put me on child support. I wasn't even on child support for a couple years until after she left, which is super weird. When it came out of the blue, but I think she was in a really tough spot and knew I'd been making money. So when she had initially left, my son was with me, stuck with me for a hot minute. I actually couldn't go to work because I had nowhere to bring him. And so I kind of put the military kind of on my back a little bit, but they worked with me really well. Despite kind of the things that are said about the military, they worked with me really well about that whole scenario. When I finally had another girlfriend at the time, so this was probably a year later, I was just now starting to get, I would say, a little ahead of my children's mother initially to see my kids more often. Obviously, I was getting my firstborn whenever because I helped raise him and everything else like that, and he kind of looks up to me more than my daughter did at the time, and didn't, because she didn't really know me. So I was getting visits I was living 60 miles away from her, and I was having to do pickup and drop off the same day. So I was getting 8 hours one day, so I'd have to go in the morning, drive out there, pick her up, drive back, and that evening do the same thing. Eventually, after that became a deal for probably 8 months, I had a different place in that town I was living in because I lost my house. I had a different place I was renting. I wasn't on child support. Everything was going all sort of decent, I would say. I was getting both my kids, and I wasn't really trying to fight with her all the time because I was trying to keep that relationship at least somewhat civil, regardless of how many times the cops were called on me and everything else like that. I just wanted to stay kind of the bigger person and not really feed into that. Finally, I landed a good job, side job, and everything else like that eventually became my full-time job outside the military. About 6 months later, when COVID was really in its spite, was my enlistment coming up. So I was getting out. And this turned into my full-time gig, where it actually allowed me a little more time to see my kids, because I was working really, really early in the mornings. So I was getting off at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And at that time also, I was looking to buy a house and everything else like that. I then found a house, was full-timing the second job. I was a diesel mechanic. I was working on semis and stuff. As a diesel mechanic, and would put all this money toward a new house for me and the kids and everything else like that, and obviously my girlfriend at the time. To then move into and have a place for everybody to be and be closer to them. It was actually like in the same town they were living in. It was like 10 minutes away. So it would have made a lot better, communication and everything else like that. And the day after I received the closing papers for this house, I got hit with the child support papers. When she put in for the child support, I was in the military still at that time, and I had not known. Well, when you're a federal employee like that, supposedly they can't get access to your records or anything else like that without your permission. And because they never asked me, they never knew what I was getting. So what they did is they basically looked up kind of what a person in my position would make and just would off of that.
Yeah.
which is what they can do. They can do it as long as a judge signs off on it.
Now, did you owe back child support?
Yes. Yep.
Damn.
So she went to the very beginning of when she left me
Wow.
because she could do that. And I had no idea. So I literally just got this real thick manila envelope, big old packet stuck inside of it, shipped right to me. I had to sign for it and everything. It was the child support papers. And she had went back from the day that she left to the time that obviously she had done it. And it was over 2 years at that point. And because she was working at a daycare, making probably 12, 13 bucks an hour. They went and found the military stuff, obviously, and whatnot, to figure out what I was making. And they got pretty close to what I was making. Don't get me wrong, they did. But because of that, the offset was over 20. It was $22.15 and like 93 cents a month for both my kids, for only getting them not even every other weekend. So this is at a time where mediation and everything hadn't been involved, and it was just her coming after me for child support. That's all it was.
And so you paid over 20 grand for 2 years. Back pay child support?
So here's the kicker on that. We'll get to that a little bit here, but yes, the arrears were, I think, $24,000 in arrears.
Oh my God.
And then the current amount obviously was the 22 something a month, and that included an arrear pay as well on top of the principal and insurance and all that garbage. So when I came and got when I got out of the military and had my second job, the military was paying me more and paying for my insurance, but this job didn't. I was paying out of pocket for the insurance. Yep. So my paychecks went from great money, decent money, I should say, to almost literally nothing. I think I was getting $200-300 a check because they were splitting it half and half for every check. Well, half of 22 is still $1,100 out of a check. And that's not on top of the insurance, and that was taken out separately after the fact. Like I lived on $200-300 a check after I just bought this new house. I made living in that house about 6 months before I had to get out of it. I had to sell 3 of my vehicles. I had 2 kind of crappy cars that I just used for work, and I had one really nice pickup that I liked for pulling my camper and everything else around. I had to get rid of my camper, had to get rid of my 70 Mustang, had to get rid of my F-350, and then got rid of 2 other cars. Had to get rid of a bunch of other garbage just to basically make payments on this child support. And at that point, it had turned around so fast that I didn't have any money to even afford a lawyer. The one lawyer, so I hit up a couple lawyers at the time to see kind of what it would cost. There's one lawyer that would work with me. The couple other lawyers beyond that were basically telling me to give up. They said just try to figure out a way to lower it. That's about it. Because they wouldn't even take any sort of payment plan. They just said we want our retention fee and carry on. This one lawyer said she would work with me and making payments and everything else like that, which with the little money I had, I was willing to do just to have this off my back. I had her as a lawyer for about 3 months doing this legal stuff back and forth, and she basically told me it's not worth going to court and everything else like that, that you should just settle with the deal like every other weekend. You get them every other weekend, you pay insurance, and they'll take a bunch off of their child support, which still equated to like $1,500 a month. I'm like, as fantastic as that sounds, that's not enough. I ended up dropping her because she was at that point telling me that there's nothing more that she's gonna do or she can do or going to do. So I said that's kind of bogus because I can do all these changes to make stuff work, and that's kind of where I said, I'm gonna do it myself. So I basically went online into any forum, anything possible that had to do with any statutes and state laws for where I live, and studied. And the binder's up in my closet right now. It's a huge binder that's got all sorts of rights, laws and all sorts of stuff on how everything was produced to me from her side that was incorrect. And actually, a couple of things were actually lying to the judge and everything when they signed the papers for child support. I would say probably about a month and a half after I had gotten rid of her, we set up a mediation meeting, and that's where I got my biggest win. So I had this binder. I went in there pretty, I would say ready. I was pretty hot and ready to go in there and be like, this is kind of something that shouldn't be happening. to a guy that's actually trying. See, I know that there are deadbeats in the world. I do know that. I've known a couple myself. But I do not think that I am one and will ever be one. It's just not possible for me to even have that outlook. I went in there pretty prepped. We were in there for about, I don't know, 2.5 hours of me just kind of reaming this mediator, this lawyer, and my children's mother up and down, just to the next Tuesday type of deal. And finally her lawyer's like, you know what? I can't argue it. There ain't nothing I can do. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a huge cut to the child support because that makes sense. And at the same time, that brings down their arrears because that it's a reset from that factor. At least here it is. It's a reset from that principle back to the arreared number. And that dropped down to about $730 bucks a month.
She was probably pissed.
You have no idea the amount of words I heard come from her. And that continued. That was like that for about a year, which, whatever, not a big deal. I was finally starting to get money back, and I was like that. I ended up, when I lost that house, moving into a studio apartment, the only apartment they had left in town. So when I lost that second house is when I became homeless. I was homeless during that whole time that I actually was studying up to get that mediation and everything fixed. I was couch crashing with a buddy of mine, which is probably my best and only friend I have. He let me crash in his couch for over a month to just kind of survive a little bit. And then once I got that mediation stuff to go my way a little bit, I was finally able to get an apartment. And that apartment that they had in town was the last and only apartment left, which is a studio apartment. But when I went to mediation, that allotted me to have every other week with the kids, and also every other week on, week off in the summertime. So I had to get a place. I had to get a place fast. So I took the very last place available in town to do so. Where I live is a very small town. The town I was living in with that apartment is about 1,100 people. So, like I said, the very last apartment, it literally was. They got 4 complexes, and I had the very last one. And yes, it might have cost a pretty penny. It was like $575 for just the apartment. And then my dog was an extra $70 a month. And then they just luckily allotted me to have my 2 kids because they weren't full time. Mm-hmm. I could have them over there, but if I had them full time, they actually weren't going to allow me to have the apartment. It was kind of crazy shit. I had moved out of that diesel technician place and moved out to a job where I was living so I could, not spend so much money in fuel. And I was working for the county I worked for, still as a mechanic, but I was working way longer hours than I anticipated, especially during wintertime, for clearing snow and stuff like that. But I was making decent enough money to be able to pay for the apartment and sort of comfortably kind of make my way into saving money. Savings, kind of put money away to kind of start building back. I lived in that apartment with my 2 kids off and on, which I had my kids more often than not. But at this point in time is when the relationship between me and my children's mother, for some reason, took a wild turn. The craziest turn. We got along, didn't matter what the subject was. It's like she came to her senses because she had, at that time, gave birth to her 3rd kid, which would have been
with your best friend?
Ex-best friend, but yes.
Right.
They're married and everything now. Like, they're together.
Holy shit.
Yeah, no, they're married. They've been living life to the fullest extent for them, especially with the money I've been giving them.
Right.
And so I don't know what happened. I actually have zero idea what happened as to why she became so cordial, but like I could literally crack a joke and she'd laugh and be cool with it. I could say some dumb shit and be all right, but it didn't matter what it was. I don't know if it was a simple fact that she was scared that I was coming back. I was like, I'm gonna make this fight worth a fight. And I think that's kind of what happened because I threatened her. I said, I just want to let you know that I'm making enough money that we're gonna go to court again. and it's going to be a way different type of ordeal. But regardless, we became super cordial. Kids sports, time for watching the kids became way more of a thing for me, because like she was taking all that money and blowing it off on trips and stupid travel stuff, and which I'm not even kidding. She actually, the one thing that really made me mad is she had all this money. She went to Disney World, and I watched my two kids at home. She didn't even bring them
she
with.
went.
Yeah, she didn't even bring them with.
Oh my god.
But her husband is saying that my kids aren't allowed to go on trips with them anymore. So they go on trips all the time. But my kids stay with me.
Wow.
So which is kind of crazy. So back to staying in that apartment again. I was like that. My family, like my mom and dad and everything else like that, they were living in Arizona at the time. We were talking, and they wanted to move back. Not only to kind of help me, but to be around the grandkids and everything else like that. It took a while, but I kind of put enough together and enough talking with my parents and everything else like that. So this is kind of where the upcoming comes back. I had a new girlfriend at the time. Obviously, after I was homeless, I didn't have one. I got a new girlfriend who I've known we're still together. I've known her for almost 15 years of our life. So we got together. She was helping me kind of this whole process, halfway through living in the apartment and stuff like that. Toward the end of that time coming, I was getting my kids almost 65% of the month is what we'd counter it in is a month. So I was getting them way more often than not, paying for all sorts of stuff extra outside of this child support, which I was keeping record of. I was keeping record of everything that I was purchasing outside of, the child support. It came to sports for my son. He's the only old enough one at school right now. Or came to clothes or anything.
And which is the right thing to do. It's just such a pain in the ass to like remember and log all of the things that you buy. It's like, why the fuck do I even need to do this? But
Yeah.
you have to.
I've got a filing cabinet with notebooks and receipts. Just that's all that's in there. Obviously, I don't need them anymore, but obviously, I'm going to keep them around as long as I can. So the biggest comeback came from is I had enough money to kind of put towards something. I was still driving a raggedy-ass car and lived in this tiny apartment, and my kids are big enough that it's kind of like, at the time, we wanted to get out of there. My parents came up with this suggestion that I would say, bailed me out. I'm gonna be honest. Like, I obviously didn't do it by myself, but we all put money down towards land and a house. But with that land came a secondary building eligibility for us to be able to put down another house for all of us to live on this land. And so they said, because of the economy and everything else like that, it just makes sense for all of us to kind of put our money towards something, which is awesome. So that was in the works for a little while, and at that time, when I was still getting my kids a lot more, I had to change jobs because I was having a hard time keeping up with having them so much, but also being around a lot because of the hours I was working. So there's this guy in town that knew of me for being a mechanic, and he needed one. So he reached out and he started me off at more money than I would ever make there at this county job I was working. So it's kind of hard to say no. And he goes, you come over, you get your own shop, and I'll buy you all the tools and everything else that you could possibly want or need. And as long as you're content over here, you keep progress, we won't have any problems. So again, back to, I was able to save more money and saving more money. It came the time where my girlfriend and I decided that we would go on a cruise with her family. Her family, they got some like tickets for this cruise or whatever else like that. So we did that. And then the day we came back was the day we got this brand new house that my parents told me about for this 12 acres we got, this nice big house with the building eligibility, and they kind of surprised me with it. So we got to move into a brand new place for my kids, and my kids absolutely love it. Like, there's like no place in the world they'd rather be, honestly. And because it put me in such a good spot, it put me in a good position to fight a little bit more for this child support deal, because my kids could have basically anything they could possibly want over here at this point. Like, we got to go through and throw shit away. There's so much stuff here from them, Shortly after we moved in, my girlfriend currently got pregnant, which, not a problem for me. She was cool with the whole idea of me living here and everything else like that, kind of with family until the house started getting built, which it is, you know. And this is kind of another downfall is I did all this so that way my kids would have something. I'd have something to leave my kids because it sure ain't going to be a piece of my wallet because that thing's thin, you know. You know, I still got some stuff through the military that can put them through a little bit of college and stuff. But that's really all I got, and that's the honest thing. I mean, there's some guys that can do way more, and there's some guys that got less, but it's something. And I just really wanted them to have a place called home because through most of all of this, I didn't have any family or nothing. It was just me.
Yeah.
I didn't really have
Right, because they were in
else.
Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
And then my biological father was in South Carolina, so there's literally nobody around where I'm living. I live in South Dakota, so that's a long ways from anybody. So I ended up getting stuck with this kind of, I wouldn't say, you know, battle on my own, but it's just the fact that nobody could really do anything, being in completely different states across the country. By the time that stuff kind of settled down and I told my girlfriend that she should move in here with me and everything else like that, she said no. She will not live with me. So,
Because of because your family also lives there, or?
So, I can't exactly tell you. It's kind of one of those things where it's kind of a different excuse every single time. I know she's not running around on me. I know that. Her family are good people. But I think her biggest ordeal is that I live a little bit further from her job than I do my own, and she don't want to make that drive. I can't exactly say I blame her. I drove a lot of miles for work. It don't really matter to me, but I can understand her excuse for it, or reasoning. I can understand her reasoning a little bit, but I've lived here for over almost a year now, and she will not live with me.
Wow. And you guys are still together today?
Yeah. Well, we got our child now, who was born in November last year. But when he was born, so a lot of time went by with us with this new house and the whole building of the new one and everything else like that. It's all kind of the same stuff, different day. Not really anything crazy happening. When it was nice, it was nice. And I was getting along with my children's mother fantastically. Not a problem whatsoever. And she actually upped the time I had with them. I couldn't even tell you why exactly, but I was getting them like basically almost 5 days a week.
It's funny once they realize, life is much easier when you can just get along, and it's great.
I think a lot of it is she likes to put on this facade that she's a good mother.
Yeah,
it's the face. But if she could offload the kids, she'll use that for no reason, just to offload them. Which to each their own, I guess. Whatever. So at this point, my son's 8, my daughter's 4. Well, she'll be 5 in a couple months here. But through all this time, both my kids, even as my daughter's getting older, they just want to come to Dad's house, you know? Even at the apartment when they wanted to be there. I'm like in this crowded, tiny-ass apartment. They were sleeping on a fold-out couch bed. And I was sleeping in literally down the hallway, and not even a room. There was no doors or anything in the place. So it was just all open concept studio. It was a studio apartment. And I just had my bed sitting in the middle of the floor there. And I could probably count just both my hands how many things I had, but compared to the amount of stuff they had in there, I think it made it feel a little more special to them. Coming down to what it is now, I was getting the kids a bunch throughout that time, starting off here at this new place, and stuff was coming together. It was just working real well for me. I got a couple newer vehicles. I should say new. I don't even like anything brand new. I work on all the old stuff anyway. But I got a couple of cars that work for me and everything else like that. That comes the point where my current girlfriend is having our third child. Well, my third child, her first. After that started in November, I basically went and had a talk with my children's mother about this whole child support deal and everything else like that. I said, we should talk it out. I said, I don't think I should quit paying it. It's obviously something that has to be done in this state. It is what it is. But I'm having the kids basically more times than you are at this point. And now I have a third one to worry about that I would like to also put funds aside for, just so I know I'm comfortable with everybody. And we kind of had a regular talk about it. She contacted me the next day, and said, I'm going to drop child support.
Oh my God.
I said, what the hell just happened?
Gotta pinch yourself like, wait a
Uh,
minute.
I said, wait, are you, I messaged her, I said, wait, are you serious? I said, I told you, I have no problem with doing what I got to do. It is what it is. I've driven it this far. I might as well keep going. I actually expected for it to be until they were 18. And she goes, no, I'm serious. And we're just going to switch to a schedule where it's a week on, week off, year round, unless something's got to change. So it's literal 50-50. Never had to go to court that last time.
That's great.
And it's still right now kind of still crazy that my checks went from what they were like 2 years ago. I was making $200-300 a check, and that was working 90-100 hours. I was making that kind of money. To now, I'm working regular 40-hour work weeks and quadrupling that pay to little to nothing. And don't get me wrong, there's still days now, even though that happened, where I still have to fight the fight with my current girlfriend with that baby, and trying to find out how that's going to work, because she won't kind of budge on the whole living in a nice house out in the country type of deal, but a little further away of a drive.
I mean, but at some point, someone's going to have to make that move, because I forgot that you guys have a newborn. So it's like, you have a newborn and you guys are living in two separate places. It's like someone's going to have to compromise.
She wants me to buy another house, and she wants me to do it in a place where I don't want to live. What should I say? There's not the same options that I have here that I would have elsewhere, where it would cost less money. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, I'm still bouncing back from child support and everything else like that still,
Oh yeah.
And even though I had to rebuild an engine on my car that cost me an arm and a leg to do, I still got to bounce back from that. Every expense is still an expense that I have to count for right now, because it's still a building back situation. Don't get me wrong, it sounds nice, but on paper, if you write it all down, I'm still hurting from all that still. I mean, I still got a lot to build back from, whether it be credit, finances, and all sorts of stuff, I mean, it sounds, like I said, it sounds really nice, but I mean, I'll be the first to admit, my parents are a big part of it. They bailed me out of a pretty deep hole that I wasn't sure I was even gonna make it out of, just from some of the thoughts I had being there, especially when I was alone. So yes, it's a solid fight from being where I was to where I am now. Don't get me wrong, but I'm still not out of the woods yet. I mean, it's still a new thing, new day. Something new every single day. Sick kids, schools and all sorts of stuff. It's a hectic time. But I also know that some people don't have the drive, or don't have the want to, because of how hard it is going to be.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it's more drive, because especially when you went pro se and went on your own, that you cannot be stupid with that. You have to learn, you have to understand the wording that they're using and all of that. And that's seems like what you did, and that's huge.
Yeah, so that ordeal was kind of crazy. So yeah, they lied about how much. Well, so because they couldn't get the actual access to my funds, they lied about what I was making. They lied about the hours I was working. They were trying to talk me out of rights for having my kids separately. So they were giving me my son and then not giving me my daughter, or were doing different times with her, which doesn't make any sense. They're siblings. So right. Like they were doing all sorts of crazy stuff that was just off the wall, that for me personally just didn't make sense. Even if you were on the outside looking in, it just looked weird. It just looked funky. And in South Dakota, it's a very mom-sided state. It really is.
Yeah.
So for her to just be able to call up CPS and be like, hey, I want to start child support on this guy. They're like, okay, we'll write something up. Get a lawyer writes something up. They ship it to a judge. If the judge likes it, he just signs it, and then you get papers in the mail. I mean,
right.
That's just how it happened, and that's what happened to me. But yeah, a lot of it is drive. I mean, you can't just let this kind of stuff I mean, it's going to bite you in the ass. It really is. I mean, and you're going to feel it too for a hot minute. But I mean, showing the drive, I think it really helped on my side, for the simple fact that I told her I wasn't going away. Like, you can do all you want to me. I ain't going away. It just doesn't make any sense.
And she saw it twice. She saw you get kicked all the way down to where you were homeless, 2 times,
Mm-hmm.
and you fought your way back. So it's like I'd be like,
Yeah.
shit,
this
hasn't worked out yet. Maybe I'll just be cordial now.
Yeah, yeah. No, I got dealt some pretty shitty hands. I was kicked down on the lowest part I could have been, but I mean, you can't let that stop you. I mean, you wake up to a new day every day. You might as well do something with it, right? I mean,
Yep.
you can't be a zombie. You can't be a zombie walking through life every single day, and you're not looking for perfection. You're just looking for progress. I mean, that's just what it is. That's what I live by every single day. I'm not a perfect dad, but these kids are raised to, I think, a pretty good extent. My son's doing great in school. My daughter starts next year. She's doing this kind of like school and preschool stuff where she's doing great in that. Like I've had my dog, let's say like my dog, animals are a pretty big part because people get these animals and they end up either getting rid of them or doing something crazy with them just because times get tough throughout like the battle of not being somewhere or not living somewhere or this, that, and the other. And I've had my dog for 6 years. He's going to turn 7 next month, and he's been here the whole time. Like, you can't just.
I was gonna say, right? Yeah, he's been with you the whole time.
Yeah, you can't let that stuff just change your outlook on life. Yeah, I was homeless, but he was homeless with me. I mean, I didn't have the computer I'm using. I didn't even have that until this year. And the only reason I got it was for my kids because they want to play games and do, wacky stuff, Minecraft and Roblox. That's all it is. But, yeah, I think a lot of it's just if no one's gonna do it for you,
Right.
you might as well do it yourself, even if it does hurt. I mean, another piece of advice that I could give is if people do have arrears, it does actually vary. You can lower those arrear payments on the principal payment for your CPS stuff too. That was a big, kind of a big part of one of them initially, with that $2,200 a month. I think it was 250 of it was just arrears. But even though it lowered down to the 1,500 or the 740 whatever mark, that arrear payment actually never would have lowered if I didn't mention it. They can minimize it, I think, to like $100 or something like that too, if you're looking for just a little bit of a break.
And then it just extends.
Yep.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
But it does still vary over time. That by 18 or however many kids you do have or else like that, those arrears do come close to being paid off, if not paid off beforehand. So because their arrears never grow, they stay right where they're at unless you somehow get them lowered like I did. But your arrears can also be a lower payment if you're paying up the wazoo, because what they want to do is they want to pay that off as quick as they can. That raises the price for them and else like that. So that's another piece of advice for people too. If you just want to call and ask your CPS caseworker or whatever, and be like, is there a way I can get just the arrears lowered a little bit because I'm paying $300 a month for them. It saves you just a little bit money overall in the principal and stuff, just to catch you a little break. So,
yeah, that's great advice, because I'm sure that there's plenty of dads out there who are maybe paying some arrearages, and that could help out. So,
yep. And if you end up in the same, so like I said, I did a lot of studying on this, obviously, because I had to. But if you're getting time with your kids, that it's getting separated, even though they are siblings, that's actually not legal. Siblings do actually have to tend to stick together unless there is separate cases that are on both of them, which in the case was not mine. They were all one case. You have to have your kids together at the same time for the same amount of time, because that's not how the system should work with siblings. Yeah, I mean, and hours. So they can't count how many hours you work in overtime if it's not purposeful. So if you tell them you work 40 hours a week, that you automatically work 40 hours a week. If you get anything more than that, they can't take it out of there because that's not a part of your actual paycheck. It's time that's actually not purposeful. So they actually can't take from that, which is cool. Or a second job. If you get a second job, they can't take from your second job. They take from your primary job. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can work on. Hence why I've always had a second job or a second income of some sort, because they can't take that from me. They only base it off the one principle. So, just a couple kind of bullet points to touch on, just so guys know that there's ways around it. So I mean, there's always something you can do.
Yeah, that's great advice, man. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. That was awesome. That was great. And it's good to hear that you're not out of it, but you know what I mean. Like you've come this far. So
Yep. No, there's dads that are in it, neck deep still to this day, and there's some dads that are stepping out of it to this day. It's a battle for everyone, and I'm cool with rolling with it with everyone else around me. So
a situation like yours and how you still were taking care of your kids and she was taking care of the kids as well, but then she went after you for child support. So now you're paying $2,200 a month, and you have to move out of your house because you can't afford it. You have to find a studio. Your checks are $300 a week. It's like, if they're thinking about the children, how does this help the children on your time when you have them? All your money's going to her, and the court system doesn't seem to even care, or even see that that's going on. Like, it's just so frustrating because, like, how do you expect me to live and take care of my kids when all my money's going here and I'm literally homeless? Like, and then you're going to be like, well, you can't have your kids now because you're homeless. Well, why am I homeless? Because all my money's going to her.
Yeah.
It's so fucked up.
the amendment process for child support is kind of real lengthy, and it still costs you $50 to amend. So you still have to pay them $50 to get an amendment done, and it could possibly not even work. It could actually go higher depending on what they see. Yep. So on that paper, on that paperwork, they try to fool you around, and it says, what are kind of your living expenses, like, rent and phone bill and silly shit like that. You could put all that stuff in there. That does not matter. They take none of that into consideration at all. I learned that through some studying. They take nothing in consideration except for your gross pay, her gross pay, and that's about it. Even the time doesn't even matter most of the time. If they tell you, if you get them every other weekend, let's say, every other weekend, 4 or 5 days a month, whatever that is. They take that into a nightly consideration over the whole month, and they just pay her the offset. That's it.
Yeah.
So literally nothing else matters. When I tried to get it amended, they denied it, and they basically told me, we can't do anything for you, so you might as well just get a second job. That was it. I was like, all right, I guess.
Yeah, it's a frustrating journey for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But
yep, nope.
Man, awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on.
Me down, you can hold me down.